Hello, everyone, and welcome to InvenTank, the show for inventors where I am joined by a special guest host each and every week for some fun conversation and to help answer all of your burning invention questions. I'm your host, Ceileidh, and we're streaming live today, or you may be catching us on one of our replays on Spotify, our iHeart, or Amazon Music. InvenTank is brought to you and made possible by the Invention Accelerator, helping inventors to cut the painful learning curve and invent wow products, protect them properly, and get in front of the right people at the right companies to pitch like a pro for license. You can learn more about that by going to theinventionaccelerator.com. So in a moment, we're going to begin taking questions. So feel free to start dropping them in the chat now or at any time throughout our conversation today. This week, I would love to introduce to you my new friend. And it's so funny because we have never even actually spoken on the phone or anything else for that matter, really in any great detail. So help me say your name right, because I know we got on a little bit late here.
Yeah, it's Ceileidh Siegel. So it's a Gaelic name. It means a dancing and music festival. If you go to Ireland, you can actually attend a Ceileidh. And I'm not a great dancer and not a great musician, but it's my name.
Ceileidh, oh, that's really pretty. One of my granddaughters, once removed, is also a Ceileidh, and she doesn't spell it like that. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
I'm a bit Irish, so I'll have to check that out. Thank you, Ceileidh, for doing that. And Ceileidh is the head of America's Innovation Advisory at Amazon AWS. And it feels honestly like such a big win to have you here with me today, Ceileidh. So thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
I think we're kind of birds of a feather. We just took different paths maybe in our innovation process and what we chose to do with that kind of gift thing. I think that's kind of born in all of us. And I love working with companies, for example, to help them improve anything, whether it's creating new products or optimizing processes to either just make a better work culture or make things more profitable, whatever that is. It's all about problem solving, right? I love solving puzzles. That's what it is for me anyway. And for as long as I can remember, even when I was a kid, I didn't do imaginary play. I was always about problem solving. What was it like for you?
Yeah, for me, I grew up in a home that was kind of like a friend had described it as like an R-rated PBS special where, it was a little bit back to nature. We had a bunch of busted Volkswagens in the driveway, small organic farm. I went to Waldorf school, so I didn't get a TV until I was, I don't know, close to getting into high school. So pretty much we had to entertain ourselves and make our own toys, make our own play, and stay curious in a way that is almost not even possible today, as my daughter is laying under my desk watching her iPad. So,
right. I was just watching, and now it's killing me. I'll remember it and I'll come back to what the title was, but it's all about athletes and how they get into flow and the difference between structured and unstructured play and how important it is in developing those skills, and how, unfortunately, as much as we love technology and all the wonderful things it does, we also have to remember that there's got to be that balance there. So how do you think that made a difference for you?
So for me, I think the majority was unstructured play, and certainly having parents who were both working parents, and my mom was in school a lot when we were younger. Like there was no orchestration in that way, and it was really kind of choose your own adventure plus make your own toys and experiences. And I think that was formidable for me. Like I remember always looking at magazines and things and falling in love with fashion, and what that meant for me growing up poor was I figured out how to make my own clothes. And then I have another distinct memory from when I was little. My parents got an addition on our home, and I saw the architect, a family friend, come over with a few different sample models that were made out of chipboard extending onto our house. And I probably played with those chipboard models for like a year and a half afterwards and started making my own dollhouse furniture and things like that. And it's just, that imaginary world that I wanted to steep myself into. And it certainly set the tone for my earlier career being an industrial designer, of like you get to make and imagine exactly what you want. And while being a pretty happy person, genuinely, you're actually always dissatisfied with the, user interface or physical function of a product because you know exactly how good it could be.
Yeah, I recently took a test. In fact, it was a guest that was on a show a few months ago. And she has this awesome assessment, and it boils down for innovators specifically. And it boils down to me being, we lost Ceileidh. I'm sure she'll be back in a second. But for all of you, the assessment taught or showed me that I have a tinkerer personality. So things are never really done. I'm always looking for ways to improve them. And I have found that it's blessing and a curse, because nothing is ever actually finished, and it can get very frustrating. But on the other hand, if you learn how to harness, as my ex-husband used to say to me all the time, use your powers for good and not evil. So if I could just harness that deep desire and drive to go ahead and invent and work on things. Glad you made it back. I was just saying about the test that I took revealed that I'm a tinkerer, and how that can be a blessing and a curse. Right? Okay. So you mentioned that you went to school to be an industrial designer, industrial engineering, but then you went on and got your master's. Tell us a little bit about that, because I don't think a lot of our audience are familiar with what kinds of education there are. And then how did you go about making a decision to go in that direction? Because I know that you feel it was a big influence. Choosing what vocation or choosing what kind of education to get makes a big deal in how good your innovation output is, I guess, later, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when I was in high school, I thought I was debating kind of between fashion design, architecture, and sculpture. And I actually, my mom brought in a magazine that had arrived in the mail, and it had a beautiful radio, I think, on the front of it, and it said "The Future of Design." And the entire issue was focused on kind of how elevated industrial design and beautiful, physical and digital interfaces were really changing the way that people had relationships with products and brands. And my mom is a nurse midwife. My dad is a pharmacist. I had no idea that there was a career really in the commercial arts in that way. And so with that magazine article, I learned about a major called industrial design. And it's kind of that beautiful fusion between engineering and sculpture.
Mm-hmm.
So I found a few different programs that I liked and decided to apply, actually only to two of them, RISD in Rhode Island, where I'm from, and Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, New York. And I got into Pratt, and my dad grew up in Brooklyn, and he's like, why the hell do you want to move to Brooklyn? Now, the Brooklyn of the late 60s is very different than the Brooklyn of early 2000s, and even very different than it is today. I'm like, damn it, I should have bought a brownstone when I was there. I'd be a millionaire now. But so studying industrial design was really important for me. And industrial designers touch everything that you love, whether that is your computer, your handbag, your shoes, and in many more ways now, bringing in that design thinking process across a number of different industries as well. When I began there, I was pretty much convinced I wanted to go into automotive design, and that's a total side passion of mine now. But so I studied primarily automotive design while I was at Pratt, but in short, it is a generalist degree that is, right in between sculpture and engineering, with that beautiful overlay of, love and usability.
Without even realizing it, do you think that that's kind of the same state of mind that Steve Jobs had about everything that he looked at? Because he ruffled some feathers. Wait, it needs to be pretty. We don't care. It's on the inside. I don't care. I want it pretty. Right?
Yep. Yeah, I love reading the story about him, and he was making a fence with his dad, and it was a lesson that he had learned from his dad, which was like, make the back of the fence just as beautiful as the front. And I could say, I have a great suite of, I have like a Apple graveyard, of the original four gigabyte iPhone, heavy user of their products, early days and still. And making things beautiful on the inside and out, making them lovable. That's actually something that Amazon talks about a lot, is minimum lovable products as opposed to minimum viable products. And when you make products that are lovable, especially digital ones, people use them enough that you're able to gain signal on them. So that means that you actually will be able to harness the data-driven insights that come out of a product, even if it's just about one specific feature of it. If it is lovable, if that calendar experience is lovable, I'll be able to understand it and then say, wow, we really should double down on this inclusive family feature or this rescheduling feature because everybody loves that part, as opposed to making products that are just barely viable, and you'll spend $1 million and I promise no one will use it.
Oh my God, I love that minimum lovable product, because I use MVP all the time, minimum
Yeah.
viable product, for anyone who may not be familiar with that term. But we want to get there fast so that we can test, right? Stress test it, find out what people like, don't like, and then improve or optimize, or maybe even walk away based on those learnings sometimes.
Yeah.
Together, right?
For
That
sure.
design thinking type process with the end user in mind. Never heard. I'm totally going to say that from now on.
Yep.
Love
So
it.
there's a great image of MVP versus MLP, and MVP, you get like a cup of black coffee that probably tastes like cigarette butts. And the MLP, you get this gorgeous latte with a heart on the top. And like both have caffeine. They'll get you where you need to go in the morning, but there's a very different experience through lovability.
So, it's funny because for me, an MVP intrinsically means that they have to love it, but the language isn't there. So I could see how someone who might be new into this game would misinterpret, especially if you're more of a left brain versus a right brain person, right?
Absolutely.
You just need to know that this does this, not that it's going to feel or look pretty. So getting people to the place where they can experience that joy is what makes it an MVP. It's not a minimum viable product until you get the love.
Yeah.
It has to be there. You see my light bulb going on? I'm so excited.
Yep.
I love this stuff. Okay, so you went on to get your master's degree, and I'm fascinated by the entrepreneurship engineering. So
Yeah.
I know a lot of schools don't offer that. I'm a big fan of Doug Hall and Eureka Ranch and his innovation programs. So tell me a little bit more, tell our audience a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've been practicing as an industrial designer at Hasbro for about 3 or 4 years, and realizing that I wanted to add some business acumen and gravity to both myself and to my resume. Knowing I didn't really know where I wanted to go, but I wanted to do more, do better, go bigger, etc. And so, at the time, and still to this day, I didn't have an option of taking 2 years off of professional work to go back to school. I looked at the HBS programs and the Stanford D School programs, and they're amazing. But I could not work full time, and so I'm really a big fan of kind of manifesting and figuring out what you need to do. And I also knew that I needed to complement my creative undergrad with a pretty impactful graduate school degree. And so I looked at the couple of universities that were local to where I live in Rhode Island, and I found this program at Brown. And I swear, I looked at the description. I'm like, this is exactly what I want. This is a mixture of kind of an MBA and a master's in engineering. And in reality, it's about bridging the gap between, really smart people in the lab and innate customer need, and then creating great products and services, to harness that technology. Now you could apply that to startups or to your own ideas, or just understand the principles better and then be able to scale and share that in a corporate entrepreneurial setting, which is basically what I did with my degree from the first, once I finished at Brown. And it's an amazing class there. It's an amazing program, but there's some very specific classes that are just tremendous and have launched a number of impactful startups out of that world. I still see myself. I'm like, I know when I'm going to get the idea. Someday I'll do that on my own. But for now, I feel a greater comfort and draw towards the corporate side of innovation.
And it's been a dream and I have had the privilege of working with large organizations on some front end innovation specifically. But having that kind of a job, unfortunately, because I didn't learn about that opportunity early enough, I've aged out of the opportunity. So, I can come in as a consultant, but no one will hire me at this point, which is fine. I'm okay with it. It's not like a pet peeve or anything, but I often wonder if in a parallel life, if I had known and could have expressed my creativity in that path, what that would have looked, certainly would have been a lot more stable than the path of the entrepreneur. I can promise you that. So
Yeah.
there's a
It's,
lot of fear that goes into in any kind of innovation, because you're taking a risk,
yeah.
whether it's inside the company where you could lose your job, right? Or on your own. Either way, you can't pay your bills. How do you overcome that?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's those corporate entrepreneurial type jobs where they absolutely have a lifespan at a particular company, and everything is kind of cyclical. There's great data and prescience behind that, but really, if you're not contributing to the top line and the bottom line after a
Right.
few years, like it's the innovation fund committee, and while that's a blast, it doesn't land, that doesn't go in your portfolio. And so that was one of the parts where, I was taught a lot about the rigor behind innovation during my time at Hasbro, and making sure that you are hardening those ideas both in the retail space, physical and digital, and against, how is a child actually going to play with this product. And that's followed me through to my career at AWS, and probably in some ways inhibited me from taking the entrepreneurial path on my own, because I know what it takes to push ideas to the limits and validate them. And sometimes it's probably given me a bit of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Like I feel like my entire job is the other side of the Shark Tank thing, saying no, no,
No,
no,
there's
try
no more.
harder. So
Oh my God, I can completely relate. So I figured out in my late 30s that I was inventing less because I could do the chess moves very quickly.
yeah,
And those calculations were saving me a lot. The downside is the naive or
yeah,
even maybe ignorant mentality that I had when I was first getting going didn't question. And as a result, I had 7 products by the time I was 34, 35 years old, doing over 30 million in sales, right? So that would have never happened if I thought the way I do now back then, because I probably would have told you all the reasons it will never work.
yep.
There's this thing. So you brought up Hasbro, and this is a great segue. And what you learned there about defining these problems and then iterating or developing the solutions with, I'm sure, design thinking in mind.
Yeah.
If you can share with us, if you were going to teach an inventor who is going, well, you are right now teaching inventors who are going through this process on their own, what kind of validation process do you think is a bar none, at least do this before you spend any more money or time on it?
Validate with users, whoever that might be. And, if it's children's products, I'm sure you have a child, niece, nephew, friend's kid who you can test this thing with. Nothing speaks greater volumes than that initial gut check. And then the second aspect is, I would say, validate with wherever your launch channel may be. So think about, how does this idea speak to people at retail? How does it help them in a as seen on TV commercial? Like, how are you going to explain this to your parents, what this
Mhm.
idea is? And sometimes breaking it down into those simple terms and the competitive set value proposition is super duper important. I always think, as I'm designing like my PowerPoint slides or a pitch deck or something like that, what is the one thing I want somebody to repeat based on this, what I've shared with them, and make sure that you're going to be happy with that top line statement, because otherwise it's not clear both in the idea or the value proposition behind it.
So yeah, memorable, repeatable. That's
Yeah,
success in a presentation, right? What did they remember, and can they repeat it to the next person? Because that's what they're going to have to do.
absolutely.
And messages that spread are the ones worth hearing. So if somebody has an idea and they don't have the core expertise that you are as a team at Hasbro, for example, and toys are a little different. And for our audience sake, I should probably just say they're much more trend driven, and it's not quite the same as a utility solution. There is function in it, obviously, but it's play. So there's an emotional validation more than there is, I think, even the other. Of course, it still has to be profitable and all of those other things. But so even though we know that category is a little unique from the rest of the more utilitarian, better spoon stuff, we still need, if we don't have the expertise, to very quickly gut check whether or not this is a problem that's a big enough problem for enough people, or something that they would want to do before you've invented it. what kind of validation or research would you recommend to unpack where the problem or pain or fun could be so that you can then invent a better solution with the design thinking in mind?
Yeah, so I would definitely start with trying to balance that innate customer need outside of the focus group of one. Just because you think your squishy hanger is a good idea, like try to get outside of yourself and your comfort zone a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
As simple as Googling the idea and seeing what comes up is a great way to gut check. Like, is this is this different from what's in the marketplace? Is this worthy of coming from the brand that you're creating? And is it going to make a difference in that consumer's life, in their lives? And make a difference is relative. Does it bring them joy? Is it useful? Does it solve a problem? But have a pretty simple rubric of, if you can't imagine a brand launching this thing, if you have a great idea and you want to pitch it to Goody Hair Care Company or Hasbro Toy Company, like close your eyes and imagine, like, does this belong on the shelf underneath that brand or underneath a brand that maybe you're planning to create or have created? Because that's really where the sweet spot is going to be, is in an existing brand or in a new brand that you're going to create. So thinking about that communication, and genuinely, does it solve a problem and within the market that is going to be unique enough to actually turn heads?
Right on. All right, I want to come back to fear in just a moment. I see HP has a question here, so I'm going to pop this up real quick.
Yeah.
I want to ask, when drafting a patent, is it wise to specify the effects of what the design do, or just describe how it works without describing the effects? It's a legal question, which we can't answer legally, but from a strategic standpoint, I have some thoughts on it, but would you like to start?
Sure. Yeah. So in my mind, it comes down to, like, are you going after a design patent or a utility patent in that way? And to start there, in just helping to codify your idea. And there was a great flow chart on LinkedIn that popped up this morning. I saw it, that was like, is your idea better served by patenting it or by maintaining trade secrets surrounding it? And that, there's not going to be one. Never mind, I'm not a lawyer, but there's also not going to be one answer that's going to be perfect. But I would just determine, is the design a defensible aspect, or is the function a defensible aspect, or both?
There you go. Couldn't have said it better. It's the difference between the design patent or the utility patent in this case, right?
Yeah,
And will help dictate the answer to that question.
absolutely. And even, design patents, they are super valuable. You start to think about, like, the look and feel of a shoe, like a Birkenstock. Like, covering a foot is not a unique piece, but like there's plenty of rip-off designs of, things that are iconic in the world, whether that is your, shoes or your toys, and understanding where does where is the uniqueness in your IP, and work backwards from there, because patents are complicated and expensive.
And it's a business strategy first, folks. Don't forget. I mean, do you even need one? And if
Yeah.
you do, which one do you need and why? Do you know the why behind what you're doing? Because if it's a business strategy and design is enough, and you don't have enough money to do maybe both, where you could do a utility and design, then that may play a role. I mean, the why behind what you're choosing is an important part. In fact, HP, for you and anybody else who's joining us today, if you'd like to book a free strategy call, you're certainly welcome to go to the inventionaccelerator.com. And I'm happy to talk through that in more detail if you like as well. Okay, so fear. At what point, maybe just from your own personal experience, at what point do you have to confront your fear and push through when you're really coloring outside the lines on something and trying to create something new?
Let's see. So, I would say I see it slightly different, like personally and professionally. Um, Professionally, like in the product development space, I think it is really, really worth putting your all into your ideas and really trying to sell them and get the most honest piece of feedback you can, and understand the what behind the why, if you are celebrated and they decide to go forward with your idea, or if they say no thank you.
Yeah.
So one of the tougher decisions that I made actually was a spur between my personal and professional bridge for ideas. So while I was at Hasbro, I worked on the reinvention of their Play School brand. And at the time, I had a 1.5-year-old daughter, and I was so passionate about this pitch. I was, my proudest work. And they loved the meeting and they loved the idea, and they decided not to go forward with it. And what that told me, both as a parent and as an innovation professional, is like, they're not going to build the stuff that I want to do anymore. I actually decided to leave the company based on that experience, and it took time because I needed to determine what I was going to do. But you need to be talk the talk, walk the walk. Like, if somebody's not going to literally put the money, whatever that statement is, I'm going to mess it up. But and it's not just a money thing. It's like that belief system that goes behind the ideas. And that idea is something that I'm so passionate about. I'm like, I know someday I will launch that experience, probably under my own auspice in some way. But it's okay if it's not ready for the commercial environment. But that meant that I didn't belong in that commercial environment at the same time. So it's a pretty big move for me to mortgage my career in that way, and then just say, if you say no thank you, I'm also going to say no thank you. And still love the company, love the products that they launch, and have many dear friends inside and outside of that company. But with that actually helped me pivot my career into digital product development, which is what I do now at AWS. So I'm head of innovation advisory for the Americas region, which basically means I'm a professional brainstormer with Amazon's toolbox. And I help all types of external companies build out net new digital product innovations on AWS using Amazon's mechanisms and methodologies. And I love doing that because I get to, most of my experience before was in toys, but now I'll work in smart farming and the future of genomics and automotive retail and financial services and insurance. So I get to learn so much about a bunch of verticals that I didn't really know much about before. That comes, though, with that great deal of fear to transition into a highly technical field comparatively. And so I was quite nervous back in 2019 when I applied for the job that I have now and ended up getting it. Just really realizing I wanted to work from home, and this was before COVID. I wanted to stay in innovation because that was my field that I had the most passionate and legitimate experience, both academic and career-wise. And I wanted to work for a brand that I could really push myself, and that there'd be plenty of space for my ideas. And I found that at Amazon.
Yeah, to grow and be stretched. That toolbox that you're taught, the innovation toolbox at Amazon, that must be like the proverbial toy box for us anyway, right?
It really is. Like, every digital experience that you interact with is probably touched by AWS. You can almost think about it as the infrastructure of the internet, closer to a utility than a computing company. And Amazon itself is agnostic to who is really on the platform. So AWS runs Prime Video or Amazon.com, but it also runs Disney Plus and Netflix and Hulu. So we really grow and scale based on that methodology, covering the undifferentiated heavy lifting, and then sometimes serve ourselves in the new product development, the next smart speaker device, but also serve, the greater community of builders, because this is available for everyone. Everyone has access to the SageMaker tools that will help with machine learning if you want to add that to one of your products. Everybody has access to Pinpoint to do very specific marketing activities and everything in between.
So how can inventors use this toolbox to perhaps validate? I mean, right now we're using Google. So we're using Google for patents. We're using Google for just general research and to learn whatever we need to know along the way, to find and connect with the right people. But it's all piecemealed together.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a system that Amazon can help us with, or AWS can help us with, specifically to structure, both have structured and unstructured play, and work us through the funnel from the moment we have an idea to the execution of it?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I would think of AWS as the home for digital building of products. So, as you are incubating your idea and you want to build, measure, learn, test, and deploy that idea with user groups or scale it for production, AWS is where you're going to want to be. It's the broadest and deepest cloud platform in that way. As far as startups are concerned, we have a tremendous, it's called AWS Connections organization, and we will help any number of startups get up to speed on the AWS platform, more so as builders. Think of AWS as almost like your medium, just like plastic is your medium for toys, or metal is your medium for tools. Digital is going to be your medium, and AWS will enable that. So within the Startup Connections program, there's a number of different folks who act as mentors, but there's also tremendous AWS credits available to really help entrepreneurs gain their wings and lower the barrier to entry technically. The last little piece I'll say, it is kind of pay per use as well, though. So it's not something you need to make a massive investment in. This could be like you're getting a bill for $3.36 when you're messing around over the course of a month, and then, as you're scaling your product and the usability is growing and the traction is growing, you can easily, you can support that with the scalability of AWS. A very simple example I could say is TurboTax runs on AWS, and you can imagine they have a pretty sleepy 8 months, and then all of a sudden,
right.
so,
Yeah, that's how it was when I was on Shark Tank. There was no sales, like it was way down here, and then it just kind of went through the roof. And that was season one. I can't imagine. Well, I'll find out soon enough because I'm about to hang out with all my old Shark Tank pals. But I've heard so many horror stories about blowing up, their sites down. Now they're losing the sales, and it's the very thing they needed the most.
yep, absolutely. So AWS is a great place to create that super reliable, scalable home for your idea, and then never mind selling your own idea on Amazon.com. You're able to do that now as an individual through Amazon Marketplace, and that's a great way to be able to connect with the infinite resources for buying and selling and the logistics behind that.
So would you, especially for those of us who aren't as tech savvy, could anyone go in, watch the videos and learn how to do this? Or are you really better off finding someone who has that skill?
Absolutely. I think there's a pretty low technical barrier for entry. There's many great online courses. My favorite happens to be A Cloud Guru, but there's a number of different YouTube classes, etc., for really doing anything from creating a very simple website all the way through to having the processing algorithms to do targeted and retargeted advertising, or customized recommendation engines, etc. So very, you can go from very simple to very complex quite quickly. I would also say that
scalability is the magic of AWS. Okay, so when you say a really simple website, so does that compare to someone who's been using GoDaddy or trying to use Wix or whatever?
Exactly. Yep. So you could use that as a similar thing, or also knowing that many of those companies actually use AWS infrastructure and create a layer that is a little bit more accessible. Wix is a great product, as is GoDaddy. So my big advice there is get your idea out there. Obviously, I have a bias towards AWS and our products and services, but just start. Get your idea out there, and you're able to really scale from there.
How does, other than just being a simple way to create a site, what specific tools or metrics or reporting is there baked into the recipe there that would be useful for an inventor who's still trying to evaluate whether they have that good idea and kind of going slow, trying to fail fast?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think that the AWS products suite would be more about creating that product and then making it available to your smaller test group. So whether you are making a new dining app or a new fitness experience to help somebody track, and or a new shopping experience that involves mixed reality. So it really would be your first stop in the creation of even a very bare bones prototype.
Of a prototype of a digital product, so that because we talk about consumer products so often, anybody who might have come into the middle of our conversation today, I just want to make sure they understand we're talking digital products right now.
Absolutely. Digital, and I would also advocate for phygital products. So those are the things that might be the IoT based devices in your home, the proverbial smart light bulbs and type, things like that, where you are taking a traditional fixture and turning it into a smart device by enabling it with Wi-Fi, with additional sensors and things like that. So there's definitely a great place for phygital products as well in the AWS ecosystem.
Phygital, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
I've never heard that one either. I am learning all kinds of new stuff on this call today. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh my. Okay. If you can go back to your Hasbro, and you were with, what was it? Forgive me.
G-Form. Yep.
Yeah. G-Form also, days with design thinking. First of all, if you can help explain just quickly what design thinking is before I get into my questions.
Yeah, absolutely. To me, it's starting with an innate customer need and working backwards from that need to craft and create a solution. In Amazon terms, we kind of would say we begin with the end in mind. We actually will write out a press release as our first prototype, date it about a year in advance, and craft that vision accordingly. But in any industry, it really is deeply understanding innate customer need, building out prototypes of that experience, and then being able to incorporate feedback loops for the usability of that idea. And so at G-Form, I led product development there. I was a personal protective equipment that had this really unique material that hardened on impact and then returned to being soft. So we were making like liners inside of hockey helmets and knee pads for mountain biking and the like. And a lot of that had to do with, what's the next new market we should enter? What's the competitive set like? What is the day in the life of this athlete? What are their common injuries? And creating products and services on behalf of them. Similarly at Hasbro, it could be, this is a big trend that's happening. This is a big movie that's coming out. This is a hole in the marketplace. How could we fill it with the next best thing?
You've got some wonderful comments here. People are really enjoying what you're saying. Celeste did mention that she loves your picture in the background, though, and I do too. So I wanted to bring it up. We'll always figure it out. You can't be in this space. So failure, the reason I talked about fear earlier and brought it up is because failure is a very important part of this process. And as human beings, we're always afraid to fail. None of us wants to fail. We don't want to be embarrassed because we feel shame. And if we feel shame, then we fall apart because we care so much what other people think. So coming back to reality, what's the most painful lesson that you learned from, but you're really glad you went through? That was a real teachable moment. And now that has maybe even affected how you look at failure going forward. So you're like, oh, okay, it's not going to kill me afterwards. I need to realize this is part of the process. Was there a moment for you, an aha moment, where you became less afraid?
Yeah, absolutely. It actually what stems back to that conversation on the reinvention of the Play School brand, because I put everything into that concept, essentially into that experience. And I actually, up until then, I pretty much had like 100% hit rate, which sounds ridiculous. But
no, I can relate.
I work on great products. I have a pretty good instinct, and I get along with everybody, and I work really hard. So somehow things tend to work out. And if my sister is listening to this, she's probably just laughing because she's like, that must be nice. So with that, I think it's really important to fail fast and learn faster. And what that experience taught me is like, look, this is not just luck that's getting me there. I did as much preparation and as much creative thinking and bringing people along for the journey as I could, and it still didn't work out. And I was like, I went through those 12 stages of grief, and the last part of it really was that reinvention, where I was incredibly determined to figure out what I wanted to do and why I wanted to do it. And since then I've had, my career absolutely skyrocket, but also I created, I think, one of the best teams at AWS and get to work on insanely cool projects all the time. the other side of that too, though, now is we're doing well enough that we get to say no. And that's a complete sentence. So we get to
Mm,
actually choose the work that's going to highlight our skills and abilities and be able to create customer delight, as opposed to trying to say, okay, I'll do just about anything to keep the lights on or pay the bills. And it's nice to be able
mhm.
to be selective in that way, so that you are successful and your customer is successful, the person or the company you are innovating on behalf of or in conjunction with.
That's so good. How long was that recovery process, your 12 stages of grief, which by the way are not never in order. Okay.
No, really, totally jumbled.
Yeah.
Let's see. It was about a year before I
Mm,
really decided what I was going to do next and what I was going to do with the energy that I needed to place somewhere else, instead of being, you know, uh, licking my wounds,
yeah.
frankly. So it started like this, where, I realized, okay, they weren't going to do my idea. That's a major bummer. And then I started to think about that rubric of the brand that I wanted, what I wanted to do next. And I kid you not, I went onto the Amazon website, I clicked on remote, and I typed in innovation, and this was the first job that came up. And it's really an important piece to say, like, really think about what are the things that are important to you in
Yeah.
your next career move or invention move. Like,
Right.
it's, there's, get your products where you want them to be. There's a million ways to find people nowadays. And
Mhm.
Hasbro has this awesome platform called Spark, where you can submit ideas, just as an inventor off the street. There's also a tremendous team of, external inventor relations, where you can submit your ideas. And many companies have entire teams dedicated to receiving innovations. It doesn't mean it's easy, and I don't want to scare anybody, but I think it was about a 1,500 to 1 hit rate, as far as how many ideas come in and then how many actually go from like the sketch all the way to the shelf. I don't know what it's like at other companies, but it's a tough business in that way. But then you can also be an inventor inside of a company, working on behalf of brands. You could be in any CPG company will have an innovation department. Any car company will have an innovation department. Uh, just find your passion in that way.
So when you're my brain is going a million directions.
That's okay.
And I want to talk really fast, but then that won't be fair to the people listening. First of all, thank you for sharing that, being transparent and vulnerable with us, because everyone looks at people that are successful and in their dream jobs or whatever, have that successful invention. Like, I don't know if you can kind of see in the back here, I have just some of my patents there, but
Nice.
like you, I had success after success after success. And then all of a sudden, one failure cost me everything and I had to start all
Oh,
over. Unlike you, it took me 6 years to recover, because I had built at that point my entire identity up in being this image. And when that image was no more, I didn't know who I was. It took me a long time to recover. What I have learned since then is that, number one, it didn't kill me. And that was the most painful thing I've ever been through. So there's nothing ahead of me that's going to kill me either. If that didn't kill me, nothing will.
yep.
The next thing it taught me was that I learned more from the failure than any of the success. What you choose to look at about it and draw from it, it helps kind of guide what you do next. And so whether it's your career or a certain product that you're working on that you're getting rejected on, pushback from companies, maybe the lesson is that that's not the right company. Maybe the lesson is that's not the right product. Whatever it is, get the lesson and don't do it again. That's the beauty of it. You don't have to keep suffering. You can
Yeah.
fix it.
Yep.
Right? I have an old phrase, no doesn't mean no, just not that way.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
It is.
uh,
It is a tricky business. It takes a very strong stomach to continuously pitch your ideas, whether that's to a venture capitalist or inside to a company as a entrepreneur or as an entrepreneur. But the reality is great products were not created with the lowercase I for innovation, like they're capital I's. They're distinctly different, and that's super that's super important for
yeah.
your growth professionally, but it's also no great idea was formed in some with like consensus building, and that way you really have to
Yeah.
consider it like as a maverick.
Yeah. And it's really unlikely that it was done without some sort of strain and pressure and evolutionary process and all of that. Failure is part of this process, folks. If you don't have a thick skin, you better either learn to get one or get out of the business. It's
Yep,
that simple.
absolutely.
Fall in love. The best way to do it too. Would you agree? Fall in love with the problem and not the solution. That's what makes it fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think really like deeply understanding those innate customer needs will allow you to target, and create an idea that's multifaceted. And perhaps there is a pivot within your idea that will then actually become success. Like a plug to the How I Built This podcast. Like, so amazing how many companies started as one thing and turned into another thing. And it's just remarkable if you can listen to those signals and try to tease out what is that lovable aspect of the idea that you're working on and double
Double
down
down
in
on
that
that.
area.
Yeah.
That is one of the lovely things about the flexibility of digital is there's a lot of what we call two-way door decisions. You can try it, see what people think, and if they love it, keep going, and if they hate it, you can turn around.
Yep.
Whereas, sometimes investing in, injection molding tooling and things like that feels a little bit more, has a little more gravity to it, but there's still many, many two-way doors to go through as an entrepreneur.
The movie that I was thinking about earlier, In Search of Greatness, I would recommend it to anybody who is an entrepreneur of any type or intrapreneur of any type, because it's all about understanding that you can work on your skills and your performance and get that stuff all day long. But the truly great ones, the Wayne Gretzky's, the Rice, all of the different football players, whatever, pick them. The truly great ones, their skills were okay, but it was their head that made them great. It
Yep.
was their strategy. It was learning how to lean into what their weakness. There was one boxer. He learned that he was so short and his arm stretch was so short that he learned that he just had to get really low and uppercut everybody. And that's how he won the fights. Like, play to your strengths, but in bed, realize and bring along your weaknesses. Don't resist them. They're part of the game.
Absolutely. I've recognized certainly like you have to bring your whole self to
Yes.
work, and that includes, it's blatantly obvious now in fully remote work. I'm showing up as a mom, as a team member, making sure that you're bringing your passions in. Like there's some really interesting things happening. I was able to work for the last 3 years for the Porsche Club of America. I'm passionate about automotive as a side hustle and just for fun. Like I think I have gasoline in my veins, and the doors that those passion projects can open for you,
Yeah.
both personally and professionally, is remarkable. And
Mhm.
y'all hear what I sound like now, and people don't take you seriously when you show up and you sound like this. And so it's a neat thing to be able to have a whole different suite of tools in addition, a complement to my actual resume that's like, no, this is she's super serious about this and very passionate and actually experienced. It's unusual that you really do need to show that at the door, but it helps open some doors.
It's
Absolutely.
that confidence that comes with just the knowing, the authority inside of you. And it can happen at any age, but I totally relate to what you're saying. I have noticed over the years my voice has gotten lower. I think I get this too. It's fascinating. I'm not going to go down that path with you right now, but we can have another conversation offline. I want to bring up Mark's question here. Mark is
Yeah.
asking, and hi Mark, by the way, he's a member of the Accelerator. What process is done on new designs? You mentioned test groups. Will that be the same group who provide customer insights and on to testing prototype?
Yeah, absolutely. So, think of whatever idea you're working on that you want to have. Do testing with people who are going to give you a pat on the back and a high five, and people who might be detractors of your idea. If I'm working on a digital thing and a reimagination of some maps experience, I want to work. With people who will only use self-driving cars and people who refuse to get rid of their paper maps, so that you get a real nice cross section of people knowing, that you can either convert some people into this new experience or bring those super users along for a new and exclusive journey. So making sure you kind of have a nice breadth and depth of people. If you're working on your own, you can form kind of a consumer panel of folks who could provide feedback regularly. So you could use, if you're doing something digital, you could use a company like Userlytics or something like that to continuously test or A/B test digital products. And then similarly, if you're doing anything with physical product tests, you want to both understand the lovability aspect and the usability aspect. So a simple example would be, if you're working on a new can opener situation, like bring it into a nursing home and test it with people who are age 80 and above, and then bring it into, walk around Target as a ghost shopper and ask somebody, hey, can you use this, and make sure to obviously document and do things above board, but making sure that you are capturing a large swath of constituents and also bringing them along for that iteration. A lot of times people are very generous with their time and they want to see what it's like in the next version and bring it along. So just kind of have that
That's cool.
contact early and often.
That is really cool. I never really thought about working with the same people. So my process is to find, maybe it's a Facebook group or a few different groups, right? And hey, I'm doing research purely for myself right now, and I'd love to get your thoughts on X, gardening with a hose versus a shovel, whatever it is. And then gleaning from those conversations, and I have some specific questions I ask to make sure it's not just a problem for me, but it's a big enough problem for enough people, first and foremost. And second of all, what their experience is with that problem. Because if I only invent it for myself, then I might as well just save my money and make a prototype and call it a day and be glad I solved my problem. But if I want to make money at it, it's a business, not a hobby, then I have to do these other things. I never thought about going back to those people afterwards with the solution.
Yeah, it's always an interesting thing to see that product evolution, and if you got a few people who give you really good, pointed, candid feedback, I found strong results in that way. We're working with a cohort in a smart farming project right now, and helping build out the features on their behalf, and then bringing it to them as a half baked, fully baked, and then a final commercial grade product has been super interesting. Now it's not the same as like I'm going to survey 700 people and get a really data driven results in that way, but I would say it's important to do your ethnographic research as well, that bottom up observational research. So asking people about their issues with their gardening tools is one thing. Observing people in their garden is another thing. So
right.
Yeah, fall in love with the problem in that way. Like you have an inkling because your knees hurt when you're gardening, but in reality, is that because of your background, or is this a universal enough problem to solve that could then be a commercially viable solution?
If I just took that little speech, that and the one you made just before it actually, and just packaged it, everybody needs to hear this process and understand it. And I think that, well, first of all, as humans, we tend to be lazy. We do the things we love and we don't do the things we hate. I mean, if we can get away with it, why wouldn't you? And I don't fault it. That's nothing to be ashamed of. But it actually is a lot of fun doing this research, because I'm assuming it's the same for you, dear, but I get more confident and I get more excited the more clear I am on where the value is. So you mentioned value proposition early, for example. When I do this research early, later when it comes time to create what we call sell sheets to pitch our products, consumer products in this case, to companies, that value proposition has been already clearly identified, and the marketing language from the research that was revealed is clearly then baked into that pitch. And that's fun. I love being confident. I don't like being afraid. That goes back to that. And the way to get confident, do the work. It's not that bad. So, and I'd rather find out it's a bad idea fast and move the hell on than waste my time and money.
Yeah. So an interesting exercise we do at Amazon is called the Amazon flywheel, which it's thinking about it in your heart of hearts. What are the areas you can make big bets on to not actually make bad invention decisions? And so ours has to do with speed. No customer ever has said, I'd like to receive my packages slower. Then another aspect of that flywheel is breadth of products. No one ever said, I'd like less options. And so, in thinking about that, as you are, and you just Google Amazon flywheel, you'll see it come up. In thinking about that for the industry that you might be inventing on, what are some of the flywheels that they may value? What are some of those key components that would be important to them? So, no farmer ever said, "I'd like to harvest a dirtier sample." No bank ever said, "I would like to have higher transaction fees," or less data security.
More
So think
frustration.
exactly. you know so when you are inventing, thinking of those areas, in toys, like they want products that are going to be sticky for kids, like more playtime,
Right.
deeper play. And so investing in the areas that are kind of uh, really solid bets, but haven't been fully explored. No car company said, "I'd like to get worse gas mileage." Pretty sure you could. That's a rich area. Um,
It's also I'm familiar with the flywheel, but in case you didn't hear if you just Google Amazon flywheel, you're saying specifically.
yep.
Great. So anyone who's listening, check that out if you want to learn more about how to play with that tool. One of the many, I'm sure, that you have in your toolbox. Um, you also mentioned Spark, and by the way, I just want to let everyone know we're coming up with only 5 minutes left. So if you have any last minute questions, drop them in the chat. We'll get them answered before we go. Spark. If someone has an idea, can you just explain that? If someone does have a tech idea or needed help, what is that
Sure.
all about?
Yeah, so Spark is Hasbro's invention submission portal, where you, as an external inventor who doesn't have commercial representation or is not part of, all the legal jargon is on there, but you can submit an idea. Who hasn't been at a party? Well, at least while I was working there, everyone comes up to you, "I got a great idea for the next Monopoly game," and I'm just like,
Right.
you.
Always.
Yeah, Spark is kind of a portal where you're able to submit your ideas, and there's a mixture of, algorithm based things. There's also a great rubric to kind of help you walk through your value proposition and the creation of this idea, which I think it's an important step, even if you aren't thinking about a toy invention, but really ways to harden your ideas in that manner. And then there's a mixture of AI based components that will get you through that first round. And then from what I know from a few years ago, there's absolutely that human element should things make it through, where they're reviewing it for their own needs. And it's always hard to say, "Oh, they're really going to double down on Play-Doh," or this is an up and coming brand that we've never heard about. So, it's hard to have exactly those answers of where the ideas are going to go, but that is a great way to practice your invention submission. And all kinds of companies have open innovation platforms and programs like that for the accepting of external ideas, or alternately they will have someone with a title of inventor relations or equivalent in many of those companies. Now some are very cloistered and not really interested in external ideas, and you can probably find that on their website. Other ones are super welcoming, or different ways to bring ideas to life within existing brands.
That's awesome. Okay. Gabriel, you got your question. Thank you. This is, Gabriel says, this is kind of weird. Nothing's weird. We're all weird. But have either of you ever had something metaphysical happen to you that just kind of told you what the outcome of one of your inventions was going to be? Like a dream, a promotion, or a really deep gut feeling? I can say that every single product I've ever worked on has always had that really deep gut feeling. But not every idea I've ever had have I pursued, because at some point that gut was checked, with some fact checked, we'll say. So I do everything with a deep drive, and I'm compelled by my passion to pursue the idea, but not so much so that I put blinders on and am mystified by why other people don't get it. I learn from the data at the same time, and I allow that to keep my gut in check along the way. It's either validating or invalidating. And if it's invalidating, then I always ask why. And I drove my mother crazy. I'm a why person. Explain this. I don't understand. And explain it to me like a third grader. I went to the Corporation Commission yesterday and walked up to the window and said, "Explain this paperwork to me like a third grader," so that I really understand it. And then I know how to fix it or solve it or walk away with a clear conscience that it really is a bad idea because I just got new data.
Yep.
What do you?
Yeah, so I would call that like quantifying your gut, because obviously, like being able to look around corners and understand, have that mixture of a prescient futurist type mindset, like that's a huge part. And but also know that like everybody's kind of reading the same things, everybody's receiving a lot of the same information. So co-invention and that premonition can be actually quite common, and you'll see the same ideas pop up in a bunch of areas. What I would say though is that like a lot of great, for me, a lot of great brand ideas really do come and make themselves abundantly clear. And sometimes it's product decisions like, oh, I should really be thinking about this. Inspired by a Play-Doh idea, by like, oh my God, if you could actually see the colors, this is really amazing. How could that change a product or experience? Or similarly, like boiling down the usability of a product to that absolute, minimum piece where, what, the button doesn't need to be a button. It can be part of the product experience. And the last example I'll share is like sometimes it comes down to like the copywriting and vision statement for a product. And I worked for a number of years on Sesame Street products, and a tagline I came up with for one of them was, most real, most lovable, most Elmo. And the team challenged me, and they're like, Elmo's not that's not a description. I'm like, yeah, but you know exactly what I'm talking about with that tagline. And so, being insistent where applicable on things, I think is super important, but knowing that sometimes it's not going to come from just a hammering on brainstorming and a bunch of people and a bunch of post-its in a room. Like it oftentimes kind of comes from that internal flame.
That was the perfect thing to end this on. Oh my gosh, talk about tying it all up with a bow too. And thank you for that question, Gabriel. And that does bring us to the top of the hour, which means we're out of time and I have to wrap things up here. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Lisa.
If you've enjoyed today's show today, please help us get the word out by sharing this show with your network. If you're watching us on Facebook, for example, just hit the share button. Maybe if you're a member of any groups or LinkedIn, whatever that is, and let other people who might benefit from this know about it as well. Or you can follow InvenTank on Spotify, iHeart, or Amazon Music. And when you subscribe, by the way, on any of those channels, that's a big help to me because it helps me get more great guests and to bring you more incredible shows. So I'm stumbling because I really don't even want to stop. But thank you, everybody, for joining. Hang out with me for a second. I'll be right back. And all of you, I'll give you back the rest of your day. Have a good one. I'll see you next week.